Welcome into Betting Pitch, episode number 228 with the real underscore G Warner. This is a Champions League episode. Well, I'm trying to fix my boom or whatever we're calling it for the mic, the popping, whatever. Anyway, on tonight's episode, it's late night with the real underscore G Warner, as always, or trying not to make it as always, but it happens fairly frequently. We're going to be doing Champions League Match Day 2. No futures discussion really because those are kind of gone now. But we're going to go through the Tuesday and Wednesday matches with, of course, best bets coming for each of the days and an ultimate best bet coming end of show. Let's. Sorry for the slow intro. Didn't expect my mic to basically fall apart as we're doing this. Okay, so we're in. As always, I already said best bets and something coming, ultimate best bet coming end of show. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe, Apple Podcast, or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review and I will read it. If you leave something of note, or really just anything, I'll read it. And if you're not a member of my Patreon or you're not a patron just yet, check out patreon.com/real_G_Warner. It's my spot to get everything, all my leads across all sports. You don't have to go and pay for it one pick at a time, nor do you have to deal with. Actually, I'll just leave that to myself. But check it out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. My leans come out each night. I update with plays and really write-ups and plays as I get them. More of a playing day of games, so I can make sure I see lineups, batting orders, things of that nature. But check it out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. And I'm just going to get into this because we don't have a ton of time to waste. So we'll start on Tuesday with Union Berlin taking on Sporting Braga from Portugal. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense considering we're only one match day into this competition to really be so worried about performances in the openers, but they do certainly color expectations a little bit. Union Berlin, they played Real Madrid as about as tough as you could in the Bernabeu, but ended up giving up a late goal, which was brutal. They deserved probably a 0-0. Didn't really do anything offensively, but now they are at home for their first Champions League match. The only problem is home is an asterisk because Union Berlin are not playing at home. They're playing at the Olympiastadion in Berlin, where it's like the Olympic Stadium, where it's the home of Hertha Berlin, who were relegated to the Schweizer Liga, the second Bundesliga from last season. And it's really the Union Berlin city rival. They chose, I think they had the option to play at home where they normally play and have like one of the best home field, home pitch advantages in the world. But they wanted to be able to open the stadium up to more people. I'm sure it's good for them financially, sell more tickets, but ultimately, I feel like this is similar to what we saw with Villarreal last season in Spain's La Liga. If you don't have your home base, I feel like it's a different game, unfortunately. Yes, I'm giving a quarter of a goal to almost everyone, but just for playing at home. But ultimately, if you're there are some ways to exploit that by deserving closer to a half of a goal or maybe closer to a quarter, or excuse me, a 0.125, an eighth of a goal, as opposed to the quarter that I give to everyone for playing at home. I'm a little worried about Union Berlin, especially because they are off to a really terrible start this year. They've kind of changed their identity a little bit. They brought in a bunch of attacking players to fill out a team that was going to need depth, but also going to need to be able to score goals to compete in Champions League while still maintaining their great performances in the Bundesliga. It has not been a good start to the Bundesliga so far. That late goal from Real Madrid unfortunately cost Union Berlin a deserved point in the first match day. And I'm pretty worried about them. They come in here, they're a half a goal favorite to Sporting Braga. I might as well pull up the numbers where they were in the past so I can give an idea of kind of where things have moved. Also need to make sure that I mention all lines are quoted from betonline.ag. And there is a promo code that I'll put in the podcast description for anyone who doesn't have an account there. I suggest adding an additional out. Never a bad idea to line shop, or really it's the best idea you can have in this sport or in this game or whatever we call this hobby, lifestyle, love affair, whatever it is, depending on the day, I guess it changes. But check out the promo code in the description of this podcast, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, or on Apple Podcasts, and you'll be able to get some free money when you sign up with a new account. Anyway, so I'm clearly just all over the place going right into this. in where this number was. So I've been tracking these numbers probably since this weekend, and Braga have taken a little bit of money, a half a goal underdog on the road now with a little bit more juice after having less when I first saw. The over-under has fallen. Some over money coming in has taken some of the plus odds so far, driven it down from 2.5 minus 121 to minus 118. So not a huge move, not significant really. But I'd like both Braga and under here. I think more of a believer in Sporting Braga. To me, were a Portuguese side who I don't follow the Portuguese Liga. Like I watch every match from the other leagues, so it's hard to. Great, thanks. All the noise in the background, of course, but it's hard for me to follow so many different leagues. Of course, I barely sleep as it is, but Braga used to be a team that really struggled to score goals, and in their opener against Napoli at home, they had a really brutal late own goal after getting a late equalizer. So you could argue that Napoli deserved a lot, but ultimately Sporting Braga were on the front foot, pushing Napoli back into their own box, and we're going to get an equalizer at some point, or we're going to give up a counterattacking goal that Napoli was going to grab. That never really happened. They did score. Then a few minutes later, it wasn't directly down the pitch, but it was close in terms of time frame. Crossing the box after a poor header, and Sporting Braga just literally one of the worst or greatest finishes if you were on offense into its own net. So that was tough. I'm sure it was a big issue for the center back who put in his own net, Niakate, if I remember correctly. I imagine he will still be in the lineup for this matchup, because if you bench him, I think it'd be too much of a problem for his confidence. But Union Berlin, I feel like Urs Fischer, their manager, is in a pretty tough spot now, where he's like, well, I brought on all these attacking players. Am I going to change what got us to the Champions League? What got us to the Bundesliga? What got us to stay up as a newly promoted in the Bundesliga, and then got us to the Europa Conference League and the Europa League, and then now to the Champions League? I feel like they're going to revert, especially because things have not gone well so far. And they're going to play a really defensive brand. And they did that even on the road at Schalke 04, who were struggling so much in the league a few seasons ago. They've done that really all the time they were good. Maybe they don't have the same personnel that they did in the past, but at the same time, I feel like they're going to return to playing defense. We've already seen them have like a 100% over record that's changed and turned around completely to an under record recently. I think that continues. I think Sporting Braga have a good chance also getting a half of a goal to go in and get a draw, because I think Union Berlin are really stuck between a rock and the hard place. And I think they're stuck in transition, trying to go to become this offensive team that were always defensive. And now they're, I think, going back to defensive, and that's kind of going to upset the apple cart a fair amount. So Braga plus a half of a goal and under 2.5 are very interesting to me in the first matchup. So let's go to the next. We'll go to Red Bull Salzburg hosting Real Sociedad. Salzburg, a quarter goal underdog at home with all the juice. Over unders 2.5, juiced very heavily to under. In terms of movement, I initially had seen Salzburg a pick 'em at Bet Online, getting some odds. So not a huge move, but significant, because a home draw now is a win from when it was a push on Saturday. Real Sociedad coming off the Basque Derby, really emotional matchup at home against Athletic Club Bilbao. I still think they're about as they're probably not as interested in this competition. I guess you could argue that there might be a little bit of a letdown factor here, considering they did play midweek. So Champions League, the match they won was 2 weeks ago. So there's some sort of they were so pumped for the Napoli match, or excuse me, the Inter Milan match, and took an early lead and kind of held on, and probably should have gone up by 2, didn't, and then end up conceding an equalizer. And that's kind of the story of Real Sociedad this season. They've started to mature a little bit more in La Liga play. Hasn't really happened in clearly with that only one performance against Inter, but now Sociedad go on the road. They were an underdog on the road at Valencia in midweek last week. Did rotate for that, I think, in preparation for these two matches coming up, though I think they took the Athletic Club Bilbao El Derby Vasco more important. It took that more importantly, or it meant more to them than I think this matchup on the road in Austria at Salzburg. And what Salzburg want to do, and it's kind of the Red Bull method, is that they want to be on the front foot attacking But really their best, in my opinion, the Red Bull Leipzig version is they're great at counterattacking. I don't know that Salzburg are that same way, and they've certainly sold off a lot of young talent, but they're one of those clubs that keep rebuilding, reloading more so. And so I feel like they're in a good position to get Sociedad off of a midweek match at Valencia, a home match that was the biggest match of the season for Sociedad at home against their noisy neighbors from Bilbao. Plus, then if you go back even further, the match before that and a match against Inter. So ultimately, things have been, I mean, a big run of really important match for Sociedad. Worry about injury, of course, stacking up and things of that nature. I think the more I talk about it, the more I'm interested in Salzburg and that quarter of a goal. I don't know if that necessarily makes me want, especially not a very juiced under 2.5. Salzburg do not seem like a defensive team to me. So my, I guess, idea here, or what I'm trying to come up with is it worth it to also go under here? I think Salzburg are going to try to score a bunch of goals. What that'll eventually force Sociedad to do is to defend and really try to counterattack. I don't really think is the way they want to play. They want to possess the ball. But this is a big ask for them going on the road, early start, fresh off of a really big Saturday match in a big derby emotional rivalry game, essentially. And now they got to go as a favorite and win on the road. I think that's more challenging. And maybe you see some fireworks here and see some goals coming in because Sociedad, their defense isn't perfect and they've been putting a lot of minutes on important players. Maybe they rotate a little bit. The line movement doesn't suggest that, but I think Salzburg are going to be up for this one as they have been really great in Austria for a long time. So I think they see this as the most important match for them in their schedule right now. Sociedad have a lot in their mind, clearly a lot they're looking at. So I think Salzburg getting a quarter of a goal is a pretty big interest for me. So let's try not to bet every game, but we'll go to the afternoon or the later window. I guess these are all night games in Europe, but ultimately afternoon for people in the United States. Lens are hosting Arsenal, currently a 3/4 goal underdog at home. All the juice on Arsenal on the road. Over unders 2 3/4. Juice very heavily to under. Racing Club de Lens are a really aggressive, or at least they want to be on the front foot attacking. Problem is they lost a ton of talent this year, couldn't retain a ton of players. They did bring some new ones in and had a pretty good result this weekend on Friday against Strasbourg, which is also big because they played Friday where Arsenal had to play at Brentford in cup play midweek and then had to play on the weekend as well. But ultimately, I think Lens are still in a position where, I mean, if they still had the same roster they did last season, I was looking to back them as much as I could this year. Unfortunately, they don't. They're really missing their heart and soul. Seko Fofana when he left for Saudi Arabia. I think I need to get a +1 here to really even consider this further. I haven't had a really great run of betting against Arsenal. I don't really think they've been that impressive really for a lot of the season or even last season really, but besides getting the results they did. I think when you ask Arsenal to win big, that's a big question mark for me. I think a +1 is a minimum for me. And then as for the total, over 2 3/4 right now, it's juiced to the under pretty heavily. I think I don't think I want under here because Lens are still same manager, same kind of idea, same way they want to play, which is very aggressively. I don't know that works really well against Arsenal, but also Arsenal are not used to the other teams having the ball at all. So I would kind of expect Arsenal to be a little bit caught off guard, certainly by the Lens fans, who are one of the best fan bases in Ligue 1 in France and maybe in Europe. I mean, one of the most incredible groups out there. I think I'll wait for +1 to see if that pops up tomorrow morning because I imagine a ton more money is coming in on Arsenal than a Liga like small club, even for French standards. Next, we'll go to Copenhagen hosting Bayern Munchen. Currently, Copenhagen, a 2-goal underdog at home with almost all the juice. Over there's 3 1/4, juice pretty heavily to over. I thought Copenhagen did exactly what was a nightmare for Galatasaray. Took a lead, didn't end up holding on to it, escaped with a draw from Turkey. But ultimately, the Turkish clubs always have big names, big expectations, and really seem to fall short. From a Copenhagen point of view, even at home in the stadium where I think Christian Eriksen collapsed for Denmark in the Euros from a couple summers ago, they're going to play as defensively as they can and try to keep Bayern Munich out. Is that possible? Sure. But Bayern coming off a trip to Leipzig in a really big Bundesliga match is a concern. Did have also to play in a DFB Pokal rescheduled match midweek. So they've been playing a lot. But one thing you can say about Bayern is they are incredibly deep. So I don't know that I'm ever going to play the tired card for Bayern Munchen unless there's a ton of injuries and they actually are very thin. But I do think Copenhagen can make this tough. I don't know if I'm really as interested in getting the way of the Bayern Munchen, whatever the Munchenschaft or whatever we call it, but certainly the Meisterschale for 10 straight seasons, it seems. I think if you do like Copenhagen, you probably want to play under 3.25 because I wouldn't really expect Copenhagen to do too much offensively, and you basically buy yourself an extra goal and a quarter. So that's the way I'd look. Next, we'll go to Napoli. They are hosting Real Madrid. Currently more juice on the Real Madrid side. Over under is 2.75 juice to the over. Napoli had started, they've been catching a little bit of money, but it hasn't moved significantly, and the total has slightly moved a little bit more towards under, but both small moves. We'll see what happens on game day. Real Madrid with a tough trip to Girona. I mean, you could say this for all these clubs, but Real Madrid fighting at the top of the table in Spain. Napoli, on the other hand, not off to a great start. Did get a good win this weekend at Lecce, who were very competitive in a lot of their matches to start the season. Victor Osimhen starting to look like he's turning on a little bit. Kind of looks like a lot of Napoli are coming together and remembering how to play each other, or at least learning how to play under Rudy Garcia. Still not a believer in him as a manager, really taking over for a win and go take the Italian national team job, which is Spalletti, if I know his name correctly, if that's what he did last season. Napoli, though, drifted off halfway through last season, got off to a bad start this year. I don't really know that I trust them too much. Real Madrid are so hard to play against, especially in this competition, because Napoli are going to be on the front foot and try to go score goals, try to win 3 points. Real Madrid on the other side, I think, are going to sit back and wait. They don't have the same type of offensive ability without Karim Benzema, and are working their way to get Vinny Jr. back, but a lot of fixtures coming up after he just returned from injury. I don't know how much you can expect from him. I think if Real Madrid, move to an underdog, that's where I'm interested. Don't really want to fight the Napoli crowd. Don't really have a feel for the total because I think Napoli want to go score goals, and Real Madrid, of course, want to win every match they play and think they should. Don't really have a lot right now, but I'll be waiting to see if some money comes in on Napoli on the home team. Next, we'll go to Eindhoven, PSV, hosting Sevilla. Currently, Eindhoven, a half a goal favorite, almost all the juice in Sevilla on the road. Over is 2.5, juice very heavily to over, potentially moving to 2.75, but we don't have odds yet on the under, so we'll see. Eindhoven, not a great start against Arsenal in the match they won. Tough handball that should have been called on the Ukrainian Zinchenko, but it wasn't worse than whatever was called the day before in the PSG Dortmund match. But if I complain about refs, I'll never finish this podcast. So Sevilla, they had a good win against Almeria this weekend, or midweek, excuse me, and then lost to Barcelona in a really tight match, put in a ton of effort trying to defend like crazy. And I do think that might potentially impact the Sevilla roster. They did play Friday, which was big. And so that should help them get as much, I guess, in their legs, as little fatigue as possible, because they were able to not have to play on Saturday or Sunday. But I think I'm still questioning Sevilla. I mean, I'm surprised to see them a half a goal underdog, way bigger than I made it, which is, I think, good respect for a PSV, but ultimately puts me in a position where I'm not looking to back Sevilla, as I'm still not a believer. They've got a lot of big names, a lot of talented players, but they're still not very good in my humble opinion. And I don't think their manager is the right person for that job. I guess if anything, I like under 2.5, but Sevilla truly under Mendilibar are not a defensive team. Eindhoven are going to have a huge crowd behind them as well. That's something I noticed in a lot of the Dutch hosted matches last season, is that the Netherlands crowds are incredible. So not something I want to fight if I'm Sevilla, or to back a team that I don't think is very good. And the 2.5 total is about what I made it. So move next to Manchester United hosting Galatasaray. Manchester United still trying to wake up, the Phoenix is trying to rise from the ashes, or the Red Devil in that type of situation. I don't know if this would be a really great spot to make that happen, but Galatasaray, with one of the least impressive performances, is a big favorite at home against Copenhagen in the first match day. Now have to prove something here. Manchester United should be pretty up for this one, I think, based on how poorly they've started the season. People are playing for jobs. Yes, they've been dealing with injuries, but So were everyone. I guess it's more of an excuse at Manchester United than other places. But Galatasaray currently a 1.25 goal underdog on the road. Over under is 3, both juiced to over and the Galatasaray underdog side. So it's around what I made it. Not surprised by the numbers. I think the total is a little bit high, but Galatasaray, I definitely question what their defense is going to look like, especially playing on the road and in England against one of the most expensive clubs in the world. There are a lot of decent, like big names in the Galatasaray side. So maybe that's gotten us to 3 as a total, and looks like the over is getting some money or has been getting bet since this weekend. I think that's my biggest interest is under 3 in this one, but that's essentially assuming that Manchester United, their poor defense doesn't give up too much to the Galatasaray side with big names. But more importantly, than the Manchester United offense just isn't able to toy with Galatasaray's defense. Like I do have some concern it may. So might be a wait and see on that one. But I do like under 3 right now. And I'm curious to see if it keeps getting bet over. Next, go to Inter Milan hosting Benfica. Inter, a 3/4 goal favorite. With more of the juice on Benfica. Over under is 2.75. Juice all the way to under. Might see a 2.5 coming up soon. This one hasn't moved, really stuck at 3/4 of a goal. Looks like Inter have been getting bet a little bit, but not significantly. And then this one has climbed from 2.5 to 2.75, but might come back down to that number. Inter, an interesting spot for me. I mean, they're a team I want to back, but they're never an underdog. Unfortunately, I don't know who they would be. Maybe on the road at Juventus in Serie A, but probably not. Don't think it would be. Don't think it'll happen at AC Milan, considering how they've basically made them their whipping boy for multiple seasons now. So not a lot of places for me to back them. I'm just trying my best to save as much money not betting against them. Benfica with a really disappointing opener in match day 1. Now they got to come back from that and try to turn it around. They sold off a ton of players, unfortunately, from a really good team last season. And I've got a feeling about Ajax with Benfica, Ajax of 2022, that's nowhere near the levels that they were expected. Benfica were pretty big favorites as second to go through this group. This is a big step for them, but they're probably going to Inter trying to get a draw. I don't know necessarily because Benfica do have a lot more offense to them, I think, than you would expect from a Portuguese side that's potentially going on the road here trying to take that draw. I think I'm more and more interested. I mean, the total has been climbing, though. It's very juiced to under at 2.75. I think my bigger interest is under 3. If it gets there, I don't think it will. It's actually a little bit lower than the number I made it, thinking we might get a 3. I don't think I want Benfica, even with a +1. I just worry that Inter Milan are just so much better than everyone now that they can kind of decide what they want to do with their competition. So before I get out of Tuesday, let's pick an ultimate or a best bet for the ultimate best bet, which will, of course, release end of show. I think it's under 2.5 in Sporting Braga at visiting Union Berlin. I know it's a little early start. Hopefully you guys get into this quickly. I'm going to put this up before I go to sleep tonight. So hopefully that all works out. But really feel like that's going to be a tough situation for Union Berlin to score core goals. I think they're kind of caught in between. And I don't think a goalless draw is an impossibility, especially with a total of 2.5, which these totals seem a little bit big in Champions League. I'll put it that way. Moving to Wednesday, Atletico Madrid hosting Feyenoord, currently Atleti, a 3/4 goal favorite with all the juice over unders 2.5, juiced all the way over. So we might see a 2.75 potentially coming, and maybe a +1 will come back on Feyenoord, as we had seen that earlier, pretty juiced. Atleti are who Atleti are. Some matches I think on the road they tend to take leads and play a lot more conservatively. Sometimes they don't do that, and that definitely throws me off when they get that lead and then push for more goals, because then sometimes they go to Osasuna and just try to hold on for dear life. With Feyenoord coming in, a Dutch side who will have, I'm sure, a ton of traveling fans on the east side of Spain, or of the Spanish capital in Madrid. But I don't know that they'll make a big enough impact. When I went to Atleti's stadium, the Wanda Metropolitano, a couple seasons ago, it was really intense, and Liverpool were there, and the crowd was nuts every time they scored. But ultimately, besides that, I didn't really have a huge influence. I don't think Feyenoord have the same type of level of quality traveling fans that are as many potentially as Liverpool do. I don't know. I think I need a +1 here to want to get involved with Feyenoord. I wasn't really expecting to get it, but looks like it's going to come back. As for over under 2.5, I do feel like I wish I probably need to trust the Feyenoord defense a lot more to play an under on the road as Atleti, because they've shown they can score goals. I don't really trust Atleti as a team that are likely to score very often, but as a pretty big favorite at home, I guess I'm pointing out that I like under 2.5 and potentially a +1 if it gets there. Don't think that they're going to make it to my card. However, next we'll go to Antwerp hosting Shakhtar Donetsk. It's a big battle for a potential third place finish and to get a bid or to fall down to the Europa League instead of out of the competition entirely. Antwerp, a half a goal favorite with all the juice right now. Over unders 2.5, juiced all the way to over. Potentially going to see 3/4 coming and an over 2 3/4 as well. Shakhtar Donetsk, they're a great program essentially, but they're not playing in their country. That's really impacted the growth of the team, unfortunately. And maybe holding on to certain players like Mihailo Mudryk. Maybe I mean they cashed out, so it makes sense what they sold. But Antwerp, I'm a little surprised to see them this big of a favorite. I gotta say, I guess I did expect them to be favored. Of course, they're at home, but Antwerp, Belgian side, Royal Antwerp are not really the most impressive, and we're one of the lowest or least likely teams to get out of their group or win the Champions League based on those type of odds coming into the season, or into this competition. So I'm tempted to go against them, though. Certainly, this is the best spot for them to get 3 points and any points for the season. Looked awful against Barcelona. Don't know how much that's impacting this number, but it has come down from 3/4 of goal here to 1/2. Probably was going to jockey between those positions. I doubt we'll see Shakhtar Donetsk getting a full goal of insurance, but Shakhtar, they are going to be able to play a counterattacking style here, and they're going to have the ball, but ultimately that's what they're so good with Mihailo Mudryk a couple seasons ago or last year, was they just used his elite pace. I don't think they have that anymore, but I do think that they're prepared to go on the road and try to stifle Antwerp side and then potentially get out on a counter. I don't think Antwerp, with their really old former Premier League defenders, can really do too much against that. So I think I like Shakhtar as a side more, though it might be a tough match in Belgium. I'm not really sure the Belgian crowds, I got to say, but and I guess I lean to under as well, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of goals scored by Antwerp, the home team. I've watched them in European competitions the last couple of seasons. I think they were in the Conference League or the Europa League a couple of seasons ago. And had a really good position against Bayer Leverkusen. We're going for goals the whole game, even with only a few minutes left, ended up getting counterattacked and giving up a goal. But Antwerp, it feels like a big competition for them. Of course, Shakhtar Donetsk not even playing in their home country at all for home matches. That's brutal too. I just don't think these two teams are that different. So the higher we get from half to 3/4 of a goal, I think the more interested I am in the road team. Celtic then hosts Lazio as we get to the later window. Celtic, a quarter goal underdog at home with all the juice. Over unders 2 3/4. Juice heavily to under. Celtic are just not a team I really trust at all right now. They have looked really bad in European play for the last few seasons. Meanwhile, Lazio have had a really slow start to the season, but started to look a little bit better. Maybe not great this weekend, but that was a tough matchup they had. And then they did get a big win during the midweek, so against Torino. So I think it's probably justified for anyone to go to Celtic and be favored, considering how poor Celtic have looked. I don't really know. Lazio, to me, are still not the firing offensive side, to say the least, but they do have some big names. Ciro Immobile is terrifying, especially from a penalty spot. They don't hold leads great, which is also a little bit dangerous for under if you're potentially looking at it. That's my interest. I think it's bigger than I was expecting. It's very juiced at the moment and seems to be getting bet. But I think if anything, that's what I like in that one. The Celtic hosting Lazio is under 2 3/4 at the current market price. Borussia Dortmund then hosts AC Milan. Currently, Dortmund a quarter goal favorite at home. All the juice on Milan on the road. Over-unders 2 3/4, juiced pretty heavily to under. This has moved a little bit from Milan, a pick'em, getting odds, to then a quarter of a goal, which is meaningful, because if they go and draw at Dortmund, they will pay you out. Or me out, or us out. My dilemma with Dortmund is I have not had a good run going against them recently, including a heartbreaking last-second goal from like a 70-yard run from a fullback after Hoffenheim were just out of gas. And honestly, can really question the effort from Ilas Bebu, who turned the ball over trying to do some sort of trick play, dribbling around a defender, and then he just went the other way. and he didn't foul him or take a yellow card, which really unfortunately cost me an under, which would have I would have lost Hoffenheim because they played so poorly. But I guess that even speaks to Dortmund, is that they win a match 3-1 really off of huge mistakes, off of a mistake on a throw in. John Brooks, American international, just continue to remember why he wasn't even anywhere near the squad for the World Cup. Then the goalkeeper, Oliver Baumann, making big mistakes, like two very trustworthy or formerly trustworthy players, definitely mistakes in Brooks, but and then a really just awful like end of game, trying to go tie the game and not really giving any sort of effort. I hope that Bebu is benched for that, but I don't know if that'll actually occur. As for this matchup, I'm still looking to go against Dortmund. I've been to the stadium. It's a really tough place to play, but it was, I mean, Schalke were so comfortable when I went, and ultimately a bad team that got relegated were hanging in there for 85 minutes. Certainly, if Dortmund get a headed goal from Yusufu Moukoko at the end of the match, like that will end up losing the match for Milan. But there's a lot of talent in Milan. It's a little bit of a weird situation for Captain America, the United States international captain, Christian Pulisic, returning to Dortmund, where he played before he moved to Chelsea. But that should, I think, motivate some guys at Milan as well, alongside him. And Milan have done a really great job of business in the summer. They haven't really had a great run lately, didn't have a good start to their campaign at home against Newcastle. But Newcastle basically went to Milan and sat in their own box the whole time and tried to get escape with a goalless draw. It worked. I still think Rafael Leao is the most dangerous player on this pitch. Dortmund are not that scary. They clearly will take advantage of big mistakes, but they also might make some of their own. I think under 2 3/4 is worth a look, bigger than I made it. And ultimately, Milan are getting a little more respect than I thought, but getting a quarter of a goal, even if it's very juiced at the moment, is my interest currently. Next, we'll go to Newcastle hosting PSG, and here we are. Newcastle probably not as interested in a goalless draw on this one, but PSG with a pretty nothing performance this weekend, and really haven't been very impressive this season. Have moved in a lot of new players. Of course, Kylian Mbappe is terrifying, and Newcastle might be a little bit left open because they're probably going to possess the ball. PSG in the past would certainly counterattack this matchup against under all their previous managers. Luis Enrique is more of a possession guy, formerly the Spanish national team manager, and they just wanted to pass the ball around for 90 minutes. Whether they scored, they didn't seem to care. I imagine that PSG will play more defensive here, but I got to say, Luis Enrique is a little bit of a wild card. PSG are so much better than everyone in their league, so we don't have really a situation to see them as a pick 'em on the road against anybody. Newcastle, a slight favorite, I guess you could call it. Slightly couple more cents of juice on their side, where over under is 2 3/4, juice the over pretty significantly. That's moved a little bit. Some money has come in actually on PSG and made this even tighter, to getting closer to pick up -110 both ways, currently -112 on the Newcastle side. Over under has dropped from 3 to 2 3/4. A little bit more money or juices on the over right now. My biggest interest is if I can get a 3 back to go under 3 here. I think PSG, if I had to guess, I imagine they'll be a little more conservative or pragmatic. Though if Luis Enrique wants the ball and they're going to pass it around the whole time, Newcastle probably won't try to let that happen. But I also don't think Newcastle would be so opposed against one of the best clubs in the world, and their first time in Champions League in a long time. The Newcastle crowd is impossible to go against at times. I've kind of learned my lesson from it. Not impressive performances, but they play really well there. Things go right for them there, and those are certainly concerns for me if I wanted to back PSG here. I don't. So I think under 3 is all I can really look for, and I don't have that right now at present. Crvena Zvezda then hosts Young Boys, one of the lower or lesser names games out there. Red Star Belgrade, a quarter goal favorite at home with all the juice. Over unders 2 3/4, juice the under. I don't really have a great look into either of these clubs, but clearly this is a big battle for that third place to fall down and drop down to the Europa League. Red Star at home have a big crowd. Looks like they're potentially trending to a half a goal favorite. Seems like money's coming in on their side, so and that would make sense, I guess. I guess I'm a little more interested in Young Boys as it climbs, but I don't really have a huge interest at just a quarter of a goal, as I consider that pretty much home field advantage, and I'm not arguing with that, especially with their ultras from videos I've seen. As for the total, 2 3/4 seems a little bit high, but I need to do some digging on those defenses, to say the least. Next, go to RB Leipzig hosting Manchester City. Big couple of matches in a row in Leipzig in Eastern Germany, having Bayern Munich come in and then Man City next. What a run for that fan base, and kind of how it's awesome. Really, I gotta say I had a great time in Leipzig last September. So kind of miss it a year ago. I guess it's already gone. But anyway, Leipzig a 3/4 goal underdog at home. Choose to split both ways. Over unders 2 3/4. Choose heavily to the over. And Leipzig did beat Manchester City last year, but I think Man City had already locked up the 1 seed and winning their group. So I don't know that there's much you can take from that one. Interesting that they found themselves in the same pod yet again. But fortunately, the rest of the group is fairly weak. Leipzig are a team that plays so well at home, plays so much better at home. It doesn't look like this is trending towards one. It's getting closer more to half than 1 goal of insurance. But if I get a full goal in Leipzig at home, that's probably my. I mean, I don't know if it's a buy price. I grab it right away, but that certainly would make me a lot more interested. Like in Django, like now you have my attention. But I think first you had my curiosity, now you have my attention, I believe is the line. But Leipzig, I mean, they are, like I kind of described earlier, the way Salzburg, I think, wants to play is the way Leipzig do, which is that they want the ball, but they're also excited for you to have it. And then they are going to just plug the middle and make you go on the wings. And that sets you up to get your fullbacks too far forward. And then, yes, Kyle Walker's one of the fastest men in the world, but he's going to have to keep racing back against some Leipzig attackers who are all really talented. I'm interested in Leipzig getting to that 3/4 of a goal. I think if there's any time, like if Manchester is going to go perfect, then I guess they're going to win here too. But I win by 2 goals to take my full unit at a plus 3/4. So I'm interested in that. I think +1 would probably be, I'm not saying a minimum, but definitely would make me a lot more interested in backing Leipzig, who I think are good at home, should have a great crowd behind them, and they play so much better there than they do on the road. So that's interesting to me. I don't think I have an interest in the total. We know both these teams can score, and Man City can score at ruthless efficiencies. So I'm not sure I want to play under with them, maybe ever, unless they're really got some sort of look ahead or playing a bunch of backups. Last but not least, we have Porto hosting Barcelona, a big battle for potential champion in our group winner, that we got a long way to go. Of course, Barcelona with a great start of the season, or to the Champions League match day 1 with a dominant win. But performances, as always, Barcelona, they go one way and they go the other. Pretty good sometimes, but still haven't looked great. And then a lot of times are very average or poor even. Porto currently a half a goal underdog at home. All the juice, nope, not all the juice. More juice on Barcelona right now, potentially climbing to 3/4. That one has been moving a little bit towards Porto, actually getting a little bit more of the juice, as it was even money last time I looked. Over unders 2 3/4, split juice both ways. That's coming down, so some over money coming in to potentially see some more goals here. Barcelona, they've been a great under team for a long time this season. Finally got back on track when I didn't bet it on Friday against Sevilla, but had a run of overs that are really unlike Barcelona. Yes, they've potentially added some better attackers, or have gotten some more, they've congealed a little bit more, but I'm still not a believer necessarily that Barcelona are that great offensively with efficiency. God, it's late. Fresh off a bachelor party, probably not a great time to be podcasting late into the night. But anyway, Porto, they're not going to be afraid, but what I do think they're going to do is, I do think they will be pragmatic, not afraid, but pragmatic, and they will do the best they can to make this as hard for Barcelona as possible. I think, of course, they want to go for a 3-point victory, or to get 3 points by winning, but as a home dog, as a half of a goal against one of the biggest clubs in the world, arguably the biggest, most popular, hard to see that coming a win. But Porto, I mean, they know how to do it. They've done it for years. They've knocked off big clubs, Juventus, if I remember correctly. So it's in their DNA. They've moved a lot of those players on. They're not the biggest club in Portugal, but might get me in fights for saying that aloud. But I don't know that I'm that popular in Portugal. But regardless, I think Porto as a half a goal underdog are always going to be interesting to me as that home underdog. But I think that 2 3/4 total looks nice, especially if it keeps getting hit with over money, because I think at 3, I'm a lot more interested. I mean, I was playing even under 2.25, I think, with Barcelona at one point when they were on such a big underrun last season in La Liga. So I don't think I'm completely opposed to that either, and it might end up happening. So um, I'm pretty intrigued by that one, but I do need to come up with a best bet from Wednesday, because then I got to get the ultimate best bet, and then get these up for all the listeners in Europe to listen to before they or I guess that's with their morning coffee, while I'm probably going to be dreaming and hoping that I can actually rest up for once in my life. But for my best bet for Wednesday, I'm going to go with AC Milan getting a quarter of a goal at Dortmund. I just feel like Dortmund have really not deserved the results they've been getting, and this is a club that can certainly make them pay for their lack of focus, lack of attention, and their mistakes ultimately. So before we get into ultimate best bet, I want to thank you if you're supporting it and listening or watching on YouTube. Please hit subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Give a rating. 5 stars would be huge. Get me up the search bar, search rankings. Get more people listening. More listeners equals more of these episodes, especially if you're trying to go along for the ride. Of course, if you're not a patron yet, check out patreon.com. So it's _G Warner. Get all my leans each night, my write-ups and plays that are locked in throughout the day. Put in a baseball one overnight, and everyone knows about it there. So it would be good, and it'd be highly recommended, especially as we enter the playoffs, which are coming up very, very soon. Did a MLB podcast today. Got an NFL podcast every Tuesday night with my good friend Andrew Schnicker, A_SCHNITKER. If you're not following him yet, make sure you jump in over there. And of course, any tips, ideas, concerns, questions, feel free to slide in my DMs. _G Warner on Twitter, Patreon, Instagram, wherever you can find me. Wherever there's silly handle like that, that's where I'll be. And if I see it, I will respond as quickly as possible. So let's get into it. This is Betting the Pitch number 228. I'm the _G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. For Champions League episode Tuesday with best bets, I'm going with Union Berlin under 2.5 goals. And on Wednesday, I will go with AC Milan, a quarter goal underdog on the road at Borussia Dortmund. And for my ultimate best bet on this episode, I'm going to go with AC Milan, quarter goal underdog on the road at Dortmund. It's going to be a tough place to play. Christian Pulisic, having previously played there, will probably make this very clear to his teammates. This is very important, but it's important to everybody. It's Champions League. Everyone's trying to make their names. I just don't believe that Borussia Dortmund has deserved the point total that they had at one point leading the Bundesliga this weekend. Their performances have not deserved it. I think they have huge mistakes in their defense, and I don't know how they're going to stop Rafael Leao. Yes, the crowd will be big, but I don't think that will really knock AC Milan too far off. And I think ultimately, unless we get some ridiculous penalties, AC Milan hang around throughout. So that'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch, number 228. I hope that number is right. Again, if you're looking to interact, check me out, _G Warner on Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, of course. The best website ever. Not going to call it X because Elon Musk can go, on himself. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on our NFL podcast. And hopefully Justin Fields remembers to hold on to the ball next week and going forward. Have a great night, and I will talk to everyone very soon.